Bienvenidos a la sexta conferencia líder en la industria de gestión de servicios y Service Desk en Latinoamérica, SDI 23 MX. BP Gurús y The Service Desk Institute reúnen a los líderes y a las marcas más importantes de la industria a través de webinars, demostraciones y conferencias magistrales. Presentado por SDI 23 MX, transformando la industria de TI. Keating ha trabajado muchos años en gestión de experiencias con diferentes organizaciones, incluidas marcas multinacionales reconocidas, proveedores de servicios gestionados y empresas de diversos sectores verticales. Con gran experiencia en servicios de TI, es un experto en cómo medir, gestionar y mejorar la experiencia de TI mediante el desarrollo de XLAs, XLMs y XMOs. Como cofundador y director de experiencia de Experience Collab, lidera y es el arquitecto principal de todas las metodologías de educación, evaluación y consultoría sobre experiencia que respaldan sus socios autorizados de capacitación y consultoría.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for coming to attend and listen to my speech around experience level agreements. So today I'm going to cover for you what are SLAs and what are SLAs dead? So I'm going to talk about XLAs and how can they help your organization to become much more successful. So before I start that, let me just very briefly introduce myself for those people who don't know me. My name is Keating. As the video just said, I work for Experience Collab. I'm the co-founder and chief experience officer. I spend most of my time with customers developing and consulting in experience level agreements and experience management offices. I help organizations measure and improve the experience that their customers get from their IT services. As a company, what we do is we try and empower the experience economy. We try to help organizations and help IT departments report and manage the success of their IT businesses based upon the success of their customers. Because far too long, we think that IT departments specifically have been focused on success purely on service level agreements. And we think that needs to change. We think that the world has moved on, and we believe that the true success of IT services is the success of those people consuming those services. So we need something more, and we need experience level agreements. So I'm going to talk about all of those things as I go through the presentation. All my details are on the screen here. Please feel free to contact me, link in with me. There's a question and answer session at the end, but if you want to ask any other questions as we finish, then please feel welcome to do so. So from an agenda point of view, I'm going to cover what is experience level management, what's the experience economy all about? Why is measuring experience important to your organization? Why should you think about measuring experience? Then I'll think about what's an XLA and what does that look like? And what does that mean then for traditional measures like SLAs and KPIs? So are they dead? Do we continue using them? Are we going to get rid of them? Are XLAs going to replace SLAs? And then I'll cover, well, what's some practical steps just to begin your journey? And I'll finish with just one question I want you to ask yourself before you start on in experience level management. Now, before I start, I really like to start everything I do with this phrase, really, this quote, because this quote is really important to us when we start thinking about experience level agreements. This is a quote by Carl William Booner, who was an American preacher made famous by Maya Angelou, the American poet. And the quote says that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And the reason why that's really important to us when we start thinking about experience is because it mentions the F word. It talks about feelings. And really, when you think about what experience is, it's about feelings. It's about how people feel. It's about how they feel about you. It's about how they feel about your product. It's about how they feel about your services. It's about how they feel about IT overall. Is IT enabling them to do their job? Or is IT inhibiting them from doing their job? So this is about how people feel. This is about how your customers, how your end users feel about the works that you're doing. And when I say that to organizations, people then say to me, well, we need to make sure people are delighted with everything that we're doing. And I don't think that's possible. I don't think people are ever going to be delighted with everything you do. You'll never please everybody all the time. So I need you to think about a different word. Rather than think about the word delight or even the word happiness, think of the word comfortable, because the actual definition of quality is a solution that is fit for purpose. And if we deliver, therefore, solutions that are fit for purpose, people will have comfortable experiences and they will be enabled to do their job. So when we think about experience, we think about feelings, and I want you to think about the word comfort. But if we want to delve into that a little bit deeper and we want to think about, well, what happens then when we ask someone how they feel? A feeling is a logical thing. And so we can ask people the question, how do they feel? And they will answer it logically. And it's their brain applying their logic to something they've just had an emotion about. But what happens when we ask that is that they weigh up all the positive and all the negative interactions that they've had with you over time. Now, of course, things that have happened recently will take higher currency in their brains. So they'll be thinking about that more than anything else. But if I've been at your organization for 3 years and you ask me how I feel, I'm not going to base my sole judgment on the last couple of weeks. I'm going to base it on everything I remember over that time period. And the important thing with that is that experience is cumulative. It's happening all the time. And it's happening particularly in IT all the time. Think about all the people that are using your technology. Most organizations, every user, every customer in an IT environment is using technology all the time. They're using your laptops, they're using your applications, they're using your internet connections, they're using your cameras, they're using this all the time. So experience is happening for them every minute of every day whilst they're at work. And it builds up and builds up and builds up. So this is a cumulative approach. So all the traditional measures that we typically have within IT, we now must think, are they measuring things cumulatively, or do we need something else? And one of the reasons why we need something else, and we're thinking about experience, is because IT has now entered what we call the experience economy. Now, that's not a phrase that we've made up here. That is a book by two gentlemen in America called Pine and Gilmore, Welcome to the Experience Economy. And what that really means, I'll cover that in a second, but what that really means is that your customers need more than what we've been delivering them in the past. Customers no longer just want service level agreements. What they really want is they want outcomes. They want to be made enabled to do their job. They want to be innovative. They want to be able to have high engagement. They want to be engaged with IT. They want to be engaged with the company they work for. So this is about outcomes, not about outputs. So our world in IT has moved on. But let's think about that experience economy for a second. Let's talk about where that comes from. So here's an example that Pine and Gilmore used in their book, which is around coffee. And what they say is that every economy in the world will go through at least 4 stages of development, 4 stages of maturity. And that will be commodity, product, service, and experience. And there may be more, but at least these 4. And as you go through these phases, you can differentiate yourself and be different from your competition, but also the price might rise as well. And here's the example around coffee. So the commodity of coffee is just coffee beans. It's very difficult to distinguish one bean from another. I think we're now, as we're all coffee experts, we're much better than that than we used to be. It was very difficult to distinguish one coffee bean from another. But then as people realized that people really liked coffee and lots of people were buying coffee, we went into the product economy. And you go into your supermarket and you'd see shelves full of coffee products. You'd see Nescafe and Gold Blend and decaffeinated coffee and different ways to make coffee and filtered coffees and pod coffees. All sorts of different coffee products appeared in the supermarket. And then as people then started to realize that actually people really do like coffee, we then started to think about services. And we saw lots more coffee shops appearing. And on every high street in every country in the world, we started to see coffee shops appearing. People go out for coffee. And if you went to your supermarket, you'd have coffee in the supermarket. And then people like Starbucks, as we entered the experience economy, did something different. And that they turned going out for coffee into an experience, because no longer do you go to Starbucks just for the coffee. And by the way, you can have any coffee you like, and you can have any milk you like, and you've got food to go with that. But people go into Starbucks because you're using their electricity. You're charging your phones on their wireless phone chargers. you're using their Wi-Fi, you're on their internet, you're listening to their music through to your headphones. So you see people having meetings in there, you see students working in there, and you see family and friends gathering in it. It's now turned it from just a service into an experience. And Starbucks can now differentiate themselves from everybody else. Also, the price of a coffee has risen quite substantially too as we've gone through that. So let's apply the same thinking to just the IT industry. Now, when I started out in IT, everything was a bit of a commodity. It was very difficult to distinguish from one hard drive to another, or one processor for another, or one PC for another. And people would buy different components and they would build their own PCs. But then as that became very popular, we entered the product economy. And people like Dell and people like HP, and there were others, started to productize technology. And we'd have different laptops. You'd have a laptop for gamers, laptops for students, laptops for mobile workers, desktops if you stayed in the office for most of your role. And if you bought loads of devices, you went into to Dell and said, I want to buy 1,000 laptops. It's okay, what type? What do you need? What type of roles have you got? It was very productized. And then as products became quite cheap and people started to try and sweat the assets a lot more and not buy much more product because they were trying to, sweat out the assets and keep their investment low. Many IT organizations, followed by most IT departments, started to develop services. And we moved into the service economy. And what happened was we developed lots of services. We had onshore services, offshore services, nearshore services, remote service desks, network services, application services, hosting services, internet services, you name it, we developed it, we ran it as a service. And coming with that was every leader of every single one of those service departments said, we need to know how well our services are performing. And so we created service level agreements. And they've been around for years, but we've had them in the service economy for a long time. And then we've had lots and lots and lots of service level agreements. Every single department had 25 SLAs associated with it. And if you go to a big managed service, they will provide you a book. These are all our service level agreements. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I think people started to think, and particularly maybe through the COVID environment, that people started to think, is that it? Is this what IT is all about? It's just about service level agreements. It's just about you keeping servers up, or you answering the phone, or you answering the tickets. Can't be right. What we want now is outcomes. What we really want to make sure is we are productive. We're able to do our job. I don't really mind how long you keep servers. I don't care whether you tell me that you've answered 90% of tickets within 4 hours. What I care about is, have I got the outcomes that I need to do my job? And so for the last few years, IT has now entered the experience economy. And it's really important for us to understand that, because now we've got to think slightly differently and we've got to start measuring things slightly differently. But it's useful to understand what's changed and why some of these things happen. I mentioned COVID there a few minutes ago, but there's some other changes as well. And these 2 slides just explain it quite well. So here you can see lots of people standing outside the Vatican in Rome, waiting for the new Pope, Pope Benedict, to come out and say a few words about what he's going to do in his reign. Remember, this is 2005. So this is back in the product economy, really, as people were starting in IT, they're still thinking about product. And you can see everyone's waiting, passively waiting for the Pope to come out and say a few words what he's going to do in his reign. Now, you roll that forward only a few years, and you get this picture. And this is the same event, but it's Pope Francis. This is now in 2013. And these are people standing outside the Vatican in Rome, waiting for the Pope to come out and say a few words what he's going to do in his reign. So it's the same event a few years later, but the picture is dramatically different. What we're now seeing is people recording and people posting this on YouTube and post this on Facebook and put it on their social media channels. And so therefore, we no longer just passively consume events. We want to actively participate in events. The rise of technology in our home lives. We've got iPhones and iPads and smart TVs and lots of devices in our home. And the rise of our ability to do that is linking to work. And we want to go into work and we want to have the same experience. We're saying to ourselves, well, from at home, it's easy for me to go from my phone to my iPad to my TV. Why can't I just do this at work? Why is it so difficult for me to get anything at work? Why do I have to go through all these security protocols to get things at work? Why do it's taking so long to do these things at work? Why can't I have the same experience that I do at home? And so it's really important for us to understand, as that expectation of our customer base has risen, internal IT departments and managed services organizations have to change, and we have to make sure we're keeping pace with their expectations. And there's a brilliant statistic by Microsoft And Microsoft say that 50% of their customers have a higher expectation of Microsoft this year than they did last year. And that's not exclusive to Microsoft. 50% of your customers have a higher expectation of you this year than they did last year. And next year, 50% of them will have a higher expectation of you next year than they did this year. Because they've got all these devices and their expectations are rising all the time, we have to keep pace and we have to understand what they need from us to do their job. And therefore, this is also about perspective. So we need to understand perspective, and perspective is really important when we think about experience. Remember I said this is about feelings. So we've got to understand how different people feel. And here's just 2 slides again that I think explain this quite well. So this is a new parent over a new baby putting in the new cot, and they just put a new mobile on the baby's cot and saying, oh, it's going to be great. The baby, I love it. The baby's going to love it too. But if you look at this from the baby's perspective, the baby sees something very different indeed. And we do this all the time in IT. We're constantly rolling out new laptops or new devices or new applications. Do we ever stop and do we ever think to ourselves, what is it our consumers want? What is it our customers need from us? What is it they want to do their job? Do we understand that? And often I know we're told to roll out new devices. We have to roll out things because of security, or we have to do things because of cost. Of course, sometimes we're told what to do by our leaders, and they tell us we've got to go and deploy Office 365 or a new application. I understand that. Even when we're told to do that, we should stop and we should say, okay, we need to roll this out. We need to make these changes. How can I make sure this is a better experience for those people that I'm about to affect? How can I make sure that they get a better experience and we're not disturbing them so much whilst we do it? And when we've done it, things are easier, things are better, things are enabling them a lot more. How do we stop and make sure that happens? So even when we're told to do things, we have to understand the perspective of the people in our organization, because this isn't about how we feel. This is about how they feel. This is about how they feel the things that we're doing for them. Do they feel that the things we're doing for them are helpful? Do they feel that the things we're doing for them are enabling them to do their job? So you need to stop and think, how do we make people feel? How do they feel about what we're doing? So this is about perspective. So if we've understood what experience is, it's that cumulative about how people feel about what you're doing. Let's just think for a second, why is this important? So why are people here? Why are people thinking about experiences? Well, it's really important now for organizations. Now that we've entered the experience economy, it's really important for our customers, our end users, because experience shapes people's opinions, it shapes their decisions, and it shapes their actions. What we do in IT absolutely matters because people have choices. People can vote with their feet or they can vote with their wallets, and they can choose to tolerate us, they can choose to work with us, or they can choose to ignore us. Now, I know that as an organization that people can't choose a new IT team, or you might be outsourced, you might be 1 year into a 5-year contract. And I know that your end users can't decide, oh, we're going to choose another IT department, we're going to choose another outsourcer. But what they can do, and what they do is ignore you. The rise of shadow IT over the last 5 or 6 years or so has taught me that it's easy now for a finance director to say to an organization, IT didn't give me what I needed to do my job. They're not listening to me. So I found this application on Google Exchange or on the marketplace somewhere, and it's £70 or $70 a month on the corporate credit card. I'll just buy that in, and that's job done. And the people who are last to hear about these things are the IT department. So even if they can't choose to walk away, what they can do is choose to ignore you. So this has consequences. If we don't get this right, then what's going to happen is we're going to be delivering poor experiences to our employees. And if we deliver poor experiences to our employees, some of the negative things on this slide will happen. If we look at, I won't read all these out to you. You can see the slides and get a copy of the slides, I'm sure. But performance and experiences matter. Highly engaged workforces outperform those disengaged employees by 20%. Highly engaged workforces have a 10% difference in customer ratings and an 18% difference in sales. Poor experiences cost economies. In the UK alone, £340 billion a year is the cost of poor experience. Now, you can read some of these things. You can see the direct correlation between a good experience and business performance. You can see the direct correlation between a good experience and people making profit. And if you're not in an organization that worries about profit, you're a charity or a not-for-profit type organization, then this will be about productivity. Good experiences drive better productivity and also efficiency. So XLAs absolutely matter for an organization. And I think the last point is also really important. So over 25% of employees would consider leaving a job because of poor experiences. When I read that stat, it amazed me. I thought a quarter of your organization might consider leaving your organization because they're not getting the experiences that they need to do their job. A, that's a lot of people. But B, the only thing worse than that is that those 25% of people stay at your organization and are still unable to do their job. So they will be there. That's what's now called quiet quitting. They stay at your company, but they're not engaged. They're not performing well, but they are taking the salary and they're just not being productive. So what we do in experience management absolutely matters to business performance and organizational performance. So this, we now know what experience is, and we know why it matters. So we've got to be thinking, okay, we better be good at measuring experience then. We need to think, how are we going to do this? So we know what it is, we know it's cumulative, and we know this is about feelings, and we know this is about perspective, and I recognize this is really important to the organization. So how can we manage it? How do we measure it? Well, there's lots of different organizations and lots of different ways that people are trying to measure experience. There's things like Net Promoter Scores, NPS, or Customer Effort Scores, CES. And there's things like customer satisfaction surveys, CSAT, and there's annual surveys, the Pulse of the Nation type annual surveys. We'll do a big survey every year. And they're all good things. I'm a fan of them all. So they're all trying to do something. So I wouldn't disregard any of them. You've just got to know where they start and where they stop and where their limitations are. So if I talk about Net Promoter Scores just for a second. So those people that don't know Net Promoter Score is a score from a -100 to a +100. And you get a score, and if you're in the positive numbers, then you're doing well. And really what you're looking for is promoters and detractors. You're looking for those two extremities. But the problem with Net Promoter Score, it's really there to measure a single transaction. How if I went into a store and bought a pair of jeans, that would be a single transaction, and that would be measured by NPS. Because you often get the score, but you don't know why you've got it. You'll know that people are a detractor of yours, they're not very happy, but you may not know why. So it's not going to be good enough. We need to measure this cumulatively. So we want something that's happening all the time. So then people start talking about customer satisfaction surveys, and they start talking about CSATs. And I'm guessing lots of you on this webinar today will be delivering CSATs after every ticket gets closed at your organization. How do you feel about how well we've closed your ticket? How satisfied were you that we closed your ticket? And there's nothing wrong with CSATs as long as you know what they are. Because a lot of people will tell me that CSATs are experience. And they say that we're measuring experience because we're measuring we're doing a customer satisfaction survey at the end of every ticket being closed. But every single one of you who've ever run a service desk will know this as a fact, that there will be a high percentage of people at your organization that log lots of tickets every month, 6 or 7 tickets sometimes a month. And there'll be a high percentage of your people at the organization who's never contacted the service desk at all. So if your CSATs are only asking people you've closed a ticket for, you're ignoring 50% of your organization. 50% of your organization don't log tickets. And we can't be saying that they've got a brilliant experience and they don't have any problems, surely. So CSATs aren't good enough. CSATs only measure a very small percentage of the organization. There's nothing wrong with that as long as we know what they are. They are only measuring the experience of the people we're closing tickets for, not the experience of the organization. So then people say, well, we do annual surveys. And what we do is we send a big survey out every year, and we ask lots of people, how do they feel, and how do they feel about IT and the technology we're providing them, and maybe even links to HR and all sorts of other things. And they're good. I think they're a good idea. But the problem with annual surveys is they're not enough. Because if I've got a problem, and we're in September, and your survey doesn't go out until February. By the time you've sent the survey and I've filled it in and I've said that my team and all my employees have really bad experiences of IT and it's just not good enough, we're not enabled to do our job, we're not very productive. By the time you've read that, understood that, worked out what my problems were, and maybe put a fix in, we're probably back in September. It will be a year late. And that's not good enough. I would vote with my feet, and I would vote with my wallet, and I would move, and I would leave your organization. Or at the very least, I would have ignored you and done my own thing and shadow IT and bought my own devices in or my own application. So therefore, we needed something different. We need something more than annual surveys. Remember I said experience is cumulative. It's happening all the time in your organization. Therefore, we need to do it cumulatively. We need to do experience surveys continuously. We want to have data back regularly, but that causes us a problem. Because if we get data back and we're sending surveys out all the time, your end users end up looking like this. Because there is such a thing as survey fatigue. If you sent me a new laptop on Monday and asked me how I felt about it, and I said, hey, it's all good, I'm very happy with that, and you asked me on Tuesday how I felt about it, and Wednesday how I felt about it, and Thursday how I felt about it, by the time we get to Friday, I'm boxing that laptop up and I'm sending it back to you and I don't want to talk to you again. So survey fatigue is a real thing. So we need to come up with a new way of doing this. Now, the truth is, people are happy to give you feedback at work 4 times a year. 4 times a year. That's the average. But there's a but, as long as it's valuable to them. Now, CSATs and NPS and annual surveys might be valuable to you. We don't make it valuable to our customers. We very rarely go back to them and say, hey, you said this, and we learned that, and we're changing something, and therefore we're going to give you a better experience. So we need to make sure this is valuable to them. So we need to communicate to them and say, hey, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and this is what we've learned, and what you said, and this is what we're going to change, and this is what we're going to do to improve your experience. That's the first thing. The second thing we need to do, though, is we don't need to ask people 4 times a year. We can use statistics, and we'll use statistical science. And if you've got an organization, we'll break it into sample groups. Don't survey everybody all the time. You'll get survey fatigue. If you've got a company and it's 6,000 people employed in that company, what you probably want to do, and you want to send a survey out monthly, divide 6,000 by 12, and you'll end up with 500. Just send a survey out to 500 people per month. Create a sample group and say, well, in month 1, we'll send it to these people. In month 2, we'll send it to these different people. And in month 3, we're going to send it to those people. So we don't need to survey everybody all the time. The way that we do it via those sample groups is that everybody would only get asked once a year. But you're going to get data back monthly because you're going to break it down into 12 different surveys, send them out monthly. Now, and if we then make those sample groups statistically valid, i.e., it's an accurate reflection of your organization. So it's not all of HR or all of Mexico City. It's not all of London. It's a representation of everybody. It's a random sample. You can do confidence levels with statistics. And you say, with 95% confidence, this data here applies to everybody else in my business. And so you can use statistics and sampling to overcome survey fatigue, which means you get data back on a monthly basis. Your customers, your end users, are only asked once a year. And that's how we've got to do it in experience management, because experience management, we need data back continually. So to measure experience is a science. We need to use the sciences behind experience management to measure this. And there's a lot that we think about in experience level agreements. First of all, there's psychology. Now, psychology teaches us that the experience really and happiness isn't about delight. It's about contentment. And that's why I use the word comfortable. It also teaches that experience has a gravitational pull, this level of expectation rising. So if we continue delivering the same things all the time, experience will go down and people will expect more of us every year. If we don't change and do something different, then their experience declines. Then we have neuroscience. And neuroscience teaches about brain habituation, which is that where things are dull for our brain wants to switch it off. So when you see a friend and they live near a busy road or under a flight path, and we say to them, I love your place, but don't you hear the noise? They say, no, it's because their brain has switched it off. And that happens when we do surveys. If we make our survey really dull, how satisfied are you? How happy are you this? How happy are you that? Blah, 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 and we make it really dull in terms of design, they're not going to want to do it. Their brain will switch off and they won't do it. So we need to make it a little bit more exciting and use different language. And then we have effective science. Effective science teaches the difference between emotions and feelings. And emotions are typically a physical aspect that we're in response to something. And we measure emotions physically, hair standing up the back of our neck, eye movement or sweat. But feeling is a logical thing. And logical things we can ask people, but we need to know when to ask people and how often to ask people. And that's what the effective science and statistical science teaches us. So we use all of these sciences, be aware of all of these when you're thinking about experience management. You're thinking, how am I going to do this? Look up some of these sciences or come and talk to BP Gurus and the team, and we'll teach you how to do this. So to answer my original question then, now we've understood what experience is and we know it's going to be measured and we know we're going to use sciences to measure that. What does that mean for traditional metrics? Does that mean that all our service level agreements we've had for years and years and years, does that mean they're dead? Does that mean we want to get rid of them? Well, the answer is no. I don't believe that. I don't believe that experience level agreements will replace service level agreements, because I think service level agreements are still a good measure. They tell us what to do and they check whether we did it. So for example, I want you to answer the phone. Okay, well, how quickly do you want me to do that? Under 30 seconds, okay? I want you to keep a system up. Okay, how long for? I want you to keep it up for 99% of the time, Monday to Friday. I want you to respond to a ticket. Okay, how quickly? Well, within 4 hours. So they're very good at telling us what to do, and they're really easy to check whether we did it. So they're a quantitative measure, and we call that O data, operational data, and they're good things. But the problem is, service level agreements don't equal happiness. They weren't designed to measure experience. They don't mean just by achieving your service level agreements doesn't mean that everybody is happy. Now, I've worked most of my career in managed service organizations, and I can tell you I've achieved in some of my roles, we've achieved every service level agreement in the book. We've achieved everything. We would do presentations to companies and say how wonderful we were because all our SLAs and KPIs were green. We must be doing a great job. Everyone must be delighted. But I was wrong, because people weren't delighted. I had customers telling me that I can see you picked up the phone and answered tickets, but you're not enabling our people. You're not educating our people. You're not helping them get better experiences from IT. You're not teaching them how to be more innovative. You're just doing what's right for your contract. You're picking up the phone and answering tickets. We've still got the same amount of tickets. We've got the same amount of problems. We've got the same amount of major issues. You're not fixing those. You're just responding and doing things. And that's not what matters to my business. What matters to my business is, are my people getting better experiences and are they able to do their job? And that's what taught me the lesson. So that's what we now call a watermelon, where IT say everything is green on the outside. Look at our SLAs and KPIs. We're doing a wonderful job. But the employees say, well, we don't like you. We don't think it's good enough. We're not very happy. So when you slice open that watermelon, it's green on the outside, but it's red in the middle. So SLAs aren't dead because they can really indicate experience. And we know if we don't do some of these things that we said we were going to do, like pick up the phone and respond to tickets, people will have a poor experience. So we know they're important. So we might want to use those. But we know if we only measure IT that way, we've got a watermelon. And we want to move away from that, and we want to grow a lime. And a lime is green on the outside and green in the middle. So of course we want to achieve our SLAs and KPIs, but we also want to make sure people are happy with what we're doing as well. So if we think about that, let's think about what an XLA is. So we know that SLAs are important, and we know that SLAs measure outputs. And we also know that experience is about outcomes. So therefore, an XLA is about measuring the outcome. It's about measuring your experience ambitions. It's about measuring how do people feel about the things that you're doing for them. Are they getting the right outcomes? Are you delivering them the right outcomes? And it's a scientific measure using some of the sciences I talked about a few moments ago. It's a scientific measure of how people feel about what you're doing. So of course, therefore, to measure experience, we need to ask people about their experience. And we need to ask them, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And that goes back to some of the comments I was saying before about survey fatigue. Using the sciences and the approaches we take, you'll avoid that. But we still need to ask them the questions. And that will tell us what people feel. And that's really important. We now know what people feel. An XLA will tell us what people feel. But that's only part of the story. We also want to know why they feel that way. So we can combine sentiment, X data we call that, with other measures like operational data, SLAs, KPIs, and technical measures. And that will tell us why they feel the way they do. So if we look at that in a couple of models, and I'm going to show you a way you can do this when you go back to your organization. We measure in an XLA, O data. That's about what you did. That's how well your services performed. How well did the service perform when someone needed it? SLAs and KPIs. We measure T data, technical measures. How well did the technology that people are using, how well did that perform? But that's also about what you did. We then add into that X data. How do people feel about the things that you're doing for them in O data and T data? How well do they feel that the services are working for them? Do they feel the technology is working for them? If we get those three things right, we will drive behavior. And the behavior is about what people did, about how they feel, about what you did. And that will drive them to be more engaged or more innovative, more productive, more efficient. Whatever it is you're aiming at, we can make that happen by measuring and improving O data, T data, and X data, and bringing all those data points into a single model. So let's have a quick look at that single model. And here's what we call the XLA stack. This is something I think you can do when you come back to your organizations and you can start building experience level agreements. Use this model. Write down your ambition at the top. Think about how you're going to ask people questions, sentiment, and then start thinking of O data and T data, how you're going to measure that underneath. And the best way for me to show you this is to show you an example. So this is an XLA stack I actually did for one of our customers. And it's a visual view of the XLA. This is what an XLA looks like. And we don't leave it in PowerPoint, of course, it's in other systems, but we show this in PowerPoint because it's easy to visualize. The ambition is to maximize employee productivity. That's what we're here to do. We maximize employee productivity. And we do that by provision of technology that's easy to use alongside valued service desk interactions. That's our ambition statement. That's what we're now going to measure. So to measure that, we would say, to what extent does IT disrupt your working day? Because that links to technology that's easy to use, and that links to productivity. The next question we might want to ask people is, how happy are you with the time it takes you to resolve your issues? Because that's about valued service desk interactions. How confident are you that IT issues will be fixed completely when you call them? That's also about valued service desk interactions, which leads to productivity. So we're measuring this by asking people questions about our ambition. Underneath that, if we're asking people to what extent does IT disrupt your day, then surely we should also measure logging times, device crashes, system outages, incident volumes, application speeds, because they're all indications of whether IT's disrupted their day. And if I flip you across to the right-hand side, if we're asking people how confident are you that IT will fix completely when you call, then we should also measure first-time fix rate and instant reopen rates, because they're all going to be indications of whether we are fixing things first time. So you can see we're bringing together X data, O data, and T data to understand both what people feel and why they feel that way, so we can make those improvements. So use this XLA stack when you get home. So how are we going to start this? How are you going to start your journey? I wanted to just give you a couple of quick steps. Now, we've developed this experience optimization framework, which is the steps you can go through when you think about experience. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this, and then I'm going to give you a call to action to do. One question I want you to ask, but let's just go through the journey that you're going to go on. So first of all, it starts with evangelize. Go back to your organizations, take that XLA stack that I just presented, go back to your organizations and think about that and talk to people about that. Does this work? Does everyone understand that XLA stack? Combine what you now know well with what other people may know differently. And combine that and work out what's your XLA going to look like. Where are you going to start this? Understand, why would experience be important to your organization? Is this about productivity? Is this about engagement? Is this about efficiency? What is it you will do? Why would you make this investment? What good things would happen if you did this? Maybe even look at what poor things would happen, what bad things would happen if you don't do this. So think about that. And then once you've evangelized and everyone's on board and you've spoken to everybody and you've built an ecosystem that everyone's saying, yeah, we agree that experience is important and we know why we're going to do it and we know how we're going to do it, then explore your organization. Move to step 2. And step 2 is, who's in that ecosystem? Who is supporting you? Who are the leaders? Who are the people who could help you? What skills have you got? What capabilities have you got? What resources have you got? What budgets have you got? What tools have you got? Think about what things you've got in the business that you could reuse. You don't need to go and buy new things. You can repurpose and reuse things. And then consider your readiness. You may want to do it. Is the organization ready? You may have other conflicting priorities and maybe you're not ready. But if you are ready, then think about what I just talked about a minute ago, which is, now you know where you are. You've done the explore. You know where you are. You know how people feel. Now work out, where do you want to get to? What's your ambition? And your ambition might well be maximize employee productivity with the provision of technology that's easy to use alongside valued service desk interactions. That's one example. You might have your own example. Think about what your ambition is and write it down as you just saw in that example there. Write down a statement. This is what we do. Choose where you're going to start. Only choose 1 or 2 areas. Don't go into 10 areas. Just choose 1 or 2 areas. Start small and grow big. Write down some ambitions, because once you've done that, you can then start moving into the enable phase. And the enable phase is then, okay, I know what we're looking to achieve. I know the outcomes we're looking to deliver. How am I going to know how people feel about that? What questions might I ask them in that survey? How do I know how they feel? Once I've understood that, what other measures have I got? How does my O data and SLAs and service performance matter to that experience I'm measuring? How does the technical areas matter to that experience I'm measuring? How can I pull all that together into an XLA stack and score it? Draw out a visual diagram like I showed you. And then you'll start to think all these different measures, how they can come together, show what people feel and why they feel that way. But once you've done that, you've got to operationalize it. You've got to make this happen. And the only way you're going to do that is by building what we call the experience management office. Now, this isn't lots of people or new staff and a new team. This is part of someone's role, because someone's got to do something at some point. So the XMO is the team of people, or the person sitting behind this that's going to do something. Because someone's got to start sending surveys out. Someone's got to gather the data. Someone's got to bring that onto a dashboard. And someone's got to ask themselves, what is this telling us? And how can I improve experience? If you don't do those things, then this is just going to sit as shelfware in your organization, and no one's going to do anything about this at all. So the XMO is really important. Think about that. Think of who in your organization would help you in your experience management office. Think about the type of people you've got and the skills you've got. Who could be a part of this team? Who wants to be a part of this team? These are the people who, who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, how often you're going to do it, tools you're going to use to do it. And if you start doing that, you're then into embrace, which is governance and improvements and innovations. How can you do this better? So there are 6 practical steps that I'd like you to take away, and I'd like you to go back to your organizations and think, that's how I can do it. But if you're just going to think about one thing, before you even do that, maybe we just think about this. And the one question I would urge you to ask yourselves is, everybody at your work has an experience. Everybody you interact with has an experience of you. Everyone you interact with in your team has an experience of your team and your product and your service. And actually, the only thing you've really got to ask yourself is, do you want to design that experience and make it the best it can be, given your budget and resource constraints and people constraints? The best I can make it, given all those constraints that I've got? Or do I just want to let it happen by accident? Because if I just want to let it happen by accident and you're just going to think, I don't really care about that, then great. Then I hope the last 45 minutes has been interesting for you, but you don't need to do anything after this. You can go back and enjoy the rest of the conference. But if you want to make it the best you can possibly make it, then start thinking about all the things I've said, and start thinking about, how can you move from service to experience? How can you move from having just SLAs to also having XLAs? How can you move from those watermelon reports you're doing today to a line? And think about how you're going to do that. And if you need help, speak to the team, contact your representative, BP Gurus. Think about, they run classes, their certification classes, get certified in experience, and ask them, how can I get certified? What classes might I need to go on? Ask your BP Gurus representatives, and they will be happy to help. But if you're only going to remember one thing, and one thing only, that I've said in the last 45 minutes, what I'd really like it to be is this. And this will come, everything will come flooding back to you. I'd like you to remember that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. And if you remember just this one statement, you have now moved from an IT professional to also an experienced professional, because you'll start remember this is about feelings. We don't need to delight people. We just need to make them comfortable. How are we going to make them comfortable? Well, we're going to ask them how comfortable they are. And now, what else could we measure? We could measure O data and T data, and we could bring that together in a single stack, a single view, and now we understand both what people feel and why they feel that way. And that's going to enable you to make better experiences and start improving the experiences of the people you're there to support, your customers, your end users, and you're making them more innovative, you're making them more productive, and you're making them more efficient. So please just remember this one statement, and everything else will come flooding back. So I hope that was useful. I hope people have learned something. I hope you can take away some of the things I've said. I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments and see if I can answer them for you.
Muchísimas gracias, Neil. Les invitamos a todos, nuestros participantes, es momento de hacer las preguntas. Pueden ponerlas en nuestro chat. de cualquier manera, no se preocupen, también puede ser en el área de preguntas y respuestas, ¿de acuerdo? Es momento de formularlas y nosotros se las leeremos con todo gusto a Neil. También él tiene la interpretación. Pueden hacer sus preguntas en español, no hay ningún problema y nosotros las haremos llegar, ¿de acuerdo? Vamos a empezar con Daniel. Dice, una organización sin prácticas ITSM y que quiere mejorar para sus consumidores puede ir directo a la adopción de buenas prácticas de experience sin tomar en cuenta una mejora previa en ITSM.
Yes, you can. We do normally recommend that people have ITSM under control. So if you've got it at least under control, you don't have to be brilliant at ITSM. You don't have to have loads of experience. You just need to know that your ITSM is at least under control. If it is at least under control, then yes, absolutely, you can go straight into experience management. You don't need to go into the depths of improvements of ITSM. You're much better off actually starting with experience, because that will tell you where to make those ITSM improvements, because you'll understand what matters to your employees. So you don't have to be experts in ITSM to do this. No, you can go straight into experience management and understand where people have got improvements they want to make, understand where they've got experience issues, and therefore what improvements you need to make back into your ITSM systems. I would suggest that you have things at least under control there, and that would be the better way of doing it.
Hay una pregunta muy recurrente que es usualmente cómo llevar el mundo de la experiencia, cómo subir a la alta dirección en estos, para estas iniciativas, cómo podemos pasar desde la tecnología, desde el IT hasta la alta dirección para que estas iniciativas puedan salir adelante.
Right, really good question. So that's part of our evangelize phase. You have to make sure you've got leadership backing. If you don't have leadership backing, the project isn't going to take off and you're not going to do great things. So what you need to do is you need to think about the outcomes of the company. What is the company really wanting to achieve this moment? And it's likely to be profit or productivity or efficiency improvements. And think about the experiences that you're going to give people and link it directly back to one of those business outcomes. What we do, we have a set of probably about 6 or 7 typical business outcomes. And we say, this XLA, how is that going to improve the business in that particular area? And we even say, 10% of this XLA improves efficiency, 30% of this XLA improves productivity, 40% of this XLA improves customer experiences, which means that the customers will be more loyal and will get more revenue through the door. So link your experiences directly back to business outcomes. You need to get leaders on board, and you do that by evangelizing and talking about experiences and running a webinar like this. Explain to them what experience is and why it is important to the business. Now, we have lots of case studies. Come and look at the website. There's lots of case studies that we can talk about. So if anyone wants to talk about that, my details on the screen here. Drop me an email and I can send you a document with lots of well-known brands that we've helped now using the same frameworks I talked about, and that might get leaders interested in this and show them why well-known companies are doing this. But link it back to business outcomes.
Carlos Maradiaga nos pregunta, ¿será más fácil para una empresa que empieza en la implementación de ITSM usar XLA en vez de SLA?
So you can do. So I don't think SLAs are going away. But if you have no SLAs at all at this point in time, yeah, absolutely, you can go straight to an experience level agreement. You can just start sending out, and understanding how people feel. You may not understand at that point why they feel that way. So you've got no SLAs or technical data. What you would only understand is what people feel. Now, there's another way you can get this, why people feel that way. You tell people who have no SLAs or not many SLAs and KPIs to develop in their organization experienced champions. And now they're people in the business that you can go and talk to and say, why do people feel the way they do? Why don't people like this element of the service? Why don't people like that particular product or application? Because you've run a survey and people have told you they don't like it, you now need to understand why. So if you don't have SLAs, KPIs, and technical data to inform you of that, then develop experienced champions and go and ask them. Do exactly the same things I've talked about in the last 45 minutes, but just don't match and bridge the O data to it because you don't have that in your organization. But go and ask people in the business, and just once a month, can I just ask you 3 questions? Why do people feel the way they do? Because the important thing is to understand not just what they feel, but why they feel that way too. So if you don't have SLAs and KPIs at the moment, yes, you can go straight to XLAs. Instead of looking at O data though, develop experience champions instead.
Rigoberto Mora nos pregunta, ¿tienes alguna referencia de herramientas que hagan la adopción de los XLA más fácil para una organización? ¿Estas herramientas se integran con herramientas de ITSM?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So the market for tool at the moment is very hot. Lots of organizations are trying to get into the XLA market. You're going to need probably 4 types of tool probably to do this. First of all, you're going to need an ITSM tool because if you have SLAs and KPIs, you want to report them. So we need that. And most of you probably have that already. So that's probably there. You're going to need a way to survey your end users. So you're going to need some form of survey tool. But you probably have that if you have an ITSM tool already. Just repurpose your CSAT survey into an experience survey the way I explained how to do that. So you don't need to go and buy a new one. You've already got that. If not, you can use Microsoft Forms or Google Forms. It comes with some of the software you've already got in-house. Then you're probably going to need some technical tools, which I'm sure most of you already got. If you don't have them, well, maybe don't use them for the next year or so. Maybe that's something you do in the future. But if you are going to go down the route of buying a technical tool, there's lots on the market. There's people like NextThink. There's people like Lakeside. There's people like 1E. They all now look at what we call digital experience. That's the experience that your employees are having with their laptops and their applications and their desktops and their operating systems. That is going to be very powerful. Now, Gartner say only 10% of organizations today have a digital experience tool. But by 2025, Gartner say that XLAs will be the de facto way of measuring experience, and 50% of organizations will have a digital experience tool. So if you want to buy a tool, think about NextThink, think about 1E, think about Lakeside. They will all integrate into your ITSM system, or the majority of those will integrate into your ITSM system, and then you've got a rounded view of experience. The only other thing you need to consider then is how do you view the data? How are you going to get X data, O data, and T data together? And you're probably going to use something like Power BI. You've probably got something like that. Lots of customers use an Excel spreadsheet still, so you can still use that, but probably better to use something like Power BI. So they're the type of 4 tools you're going to need. ITSM tool, a survey tool, a digital experience tool, and a way to view it. There are a couple of major suppliers that are bringing all of that together onto the market in one go. They're not ready yet, but that is coming probably next year. But at the moment, just use what you have. And if you don't have one of them, drop that from the experience program for the moment and maybe bring it in year 2 and year 3.
Vamos a seguir en la misma línea. ¿Qué hay de software de apoyo? ¿Servicios adicionales, add-ons de Atlassian o algún otro fabricante?
Well, was that question around outsourcing? If you've got outsourcing agreements, do you think? Yeah.
Sí.
Yeah.
Adelante.
Okay. So if you're outsourced, 2 things I would suggest you do. So if you've got manufacturing support or you've got outsourced support, another supplier delivering some of the things, work with them to understand their XLAs. So you still own the experience of your employees. So that's the key thing. You can't outsource experience. You can outsource the delivery of some of those things, but you own the experience of the employees that you are employed in your company. That's your responsibility. You may ask the outsourcer to deliver some of those things. So work with your outsourcer, put in the same structure I talked about, but talk to your outsourcer about, well, how are they going to run surveys, or what technical data have they got to do this, and what operational data have they got, and how we're going to bridge it together. And then every month, sit with your outsourcer and be open and honest and collaborative. This is a joint commitment between you and them. It's not their responsibility or just yours. This is a joint responsibility. So be open with them, talk to them about the things they can do and the things you can do, and how you can together drive better experiences. So this is a very different way of looking at outsourcing now. We're used to looking at outsourcing with carrots and sticks, and you didn't do this, and therefore we're going to penalize you. We're now saying, actually, if we want to drive a better experience, let's do this openly and collaboratively. Now, the other thing I would suggest, if you're outsourced rather, the other thing I would suggest is that you think about how your outsourcer makes you feel. Because at the end of your outsourcing contract, you're going to renew or not that contract based upon, of course, the cost of that contract, also whether they did the things they said they were going to do. Everyone knows that. There's two open things. The third thing you're going to do, which nobody talks about, is whether you like them. Because if you don't like them, you're not going to renew their contract regardless of their cost or whether they did what they said they're going to do. So have an XLA with your outsourcer. How do they make you feel? Internally, ask people questions. How do you feel about working with them? Are they good? Are they doing the right things? Are they doing what's right for doing what's right for our business? Or are they doing what's just right for their contract? And if you feel good about it, then you can start telling them, hey, we feel great about the things you're doing and we're going to work more collaboratively together. If you don't feel good about it, tell them again, we don't like working with you at the moment because you're not very collaborative, you're not very innovative, and give them the chance to change. So this is about being open, communicative, collaborative, and doing things in a very different way.
Y tecnológicamente hablando, ¿algún tipo de plataforma, aplicativo o add-in que se pudiera poner en algunos otros lados? ¿Tienes referencias de ellos?
In terms of the technology that we've used, so typically what a lot of companies use, I guess the biggest area of the technologies that people use, a lot of people have ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is a very popular element to do. They do the operational data and some of the reporting. Most of the people we kind of work with probably have a tool like NextThink. NextThink is probably the number one leader in the market for digital experience. So a lot of tool people have NextThink, but there are others. You've got Lakeside and you've got 1E and people like that. So you know there are others, but probably ServiceNow, NextThink, or a tool like Happy Signals. Happy Signals is a survey tool, or a tool like Qualtrics. Qualtrics is another survey tool. So there's several on the market. I guess the ones we see more and more are probably NextThink, Happy Signals, Qualtrics, but they're not alone. There's more and more coming onto the market every month. It seems to be more people want to get into experience. So do your research, shop around, see a few of those people. If you want to know more, then drop me an email and I'll give you the contacts and of those technologies that typically people are using, that we see typically people using, and then go and speak to them and see what they have to say.
Neil, para cerrar, una última petición por acá. ¿Cuál es el framework o el marco de referencia recomendado para la experiencia?
So we have a couple of frameworks. So there's the experience management framework. If you come to the website, you'll see the experience management framework. That's the way that everyone's going to measure experience. That's the de facto way that big organizations are now measuring experience. It's called the experience management framework, and that will help you understand business outcomes. It helps you understand the experience ambitions, and then it helps you understand the controlled experience indicators you're going to measure to see whether you've achieved those business outcomes. So that's the experience management framework. Look at our website. Now that breaks out into that XLA stack I showed you, and then you've got the journey, the experience optimization framework, which takes you through the journey. So there's three frameworks I would suggest you look at. They're all on our website. The experience management framework, that's the overall picture. The XLA stack is that how you're going to visualize the XLA, and the experience optimization framework is what's your journey going to look like? What sort of things do you need to do step by step? So they're the three that I recommend people look at.
Neil, agradecemos mucho tu participación, tu experiencia y por supuesto todo lo que nos has compartido y no nos queda más que agradecerte. Muchísimas gracias.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. It's been a great pleasure to come and speak to you. I hope you found all that useful. So thank you.
Muchas gracias. A todos nuestros asistentes también les agradecemos la participación. Vamos a cerrar esta sesión recordándoles que van a estar disponibles las conferencias a partir de la próxima semana. Se los haremos llegar por correo ya que estén disponibles para que ustedes puedan verlas nuevamente. Y también agradecemos que nos ayuden con la encuesta de satisfacción que aparecerá al final del cierre de la sesión para que ahí nos pongan cualquier comentario y si necesitan que Neil se ponga en contacto o ustedes tienen alguna inquietud adicional, bueno, nosotros se la podemos hacer llegar a Neil con todo gusto, aunque él también les puso su contacto, ¿de acuerdo? Siéntanse en la libertad de hacerlo y solo recordarles la siguiente conferencia que es en punto de las 12 del día, hora de la Ciudad de México, de Future Thinking. Muchísimas gracias y hasta pronto.